Hey, this is Heidi Dawson. If you love all things health and wellness and style of any kind, hang out here with me each week. I'm obsessed with never-ending improvement, and it's all in an effort to help each one of us live a wildly successful lifestyle. Subscribe today so you don't miss a thing.
Hi, guys. Welcome to episode 314 of the Wildly Successful Lifestyle Podcast. Good to be with you as always. So I had this weird thing when I was a kid where I wouldn't let my hand hang over the edge of my bed in case something was under there and they grabbed it. When you were a kid, did you ever do that? Did you ever worry about some kind of something being in the closet or under your bed? But here's the thing for me. I never had any reason to think something was under my bed. I didn't have PTSD from something being in my past that had happened. So it was something I made up completely in my head. Now, once the morning came, it was clear there was nothing under there and my fear was for nothing. But I still do that sometimes. But now I do it with grown-up things, whether it's with having a hard conversation with someone or finding a weird-looking mole on my chest. We have a tendency to create things in our head of what bad things could possibly happen, only to find out that, well, they weren't so bad after all, at least not as bad as we created in our head. I remember when COVID was going strong and we had a lot of friends that were really, really terrified, legitimately so. There were people that were really sick. But also, the news sort of thrives on scaring people, so eventually we realized that some of the hype was blown way out of proportion. Now, one of my friends was extra scared. She was having real anxiety attacks because she was so worried about her mother, who is elderly, getting COVID. But then the monster called COVID showed up. And she and all of her family, they all tested positive for COVID. Now, her sweet elderly mother wouldn't have even known that she was sick, but they made her test because she'd been exposed. So the monster that was created in her head that probably took years off her life ended up being a sniffle for her and her husband and no symptoms at all for her mother. You see, we all do this, though. I had one of my annual checkups come back unusual a few years ago, and so I had to get more tests done to see if it was something bad. Let me tell you, those 2 weeks it took to get those results, they were really hard. I created just about every scenario in my head, none of them being good. I even imagined people being at my funeral, really optimistic thoughts. But everything came back just perfectly normal. All that worry and anxiety and stress for 2 weeks for nothing. We create monsters in our head all the time. What if I lose my job? What if the stock market tanks? What if I have cancer? What if my partner leaves me? What if my loved one dies? What if they stop loving me? We create all of these mystical monsters. And the truth is, some of these things could happen. But you putting yourself in a position to be a victim to things is not empowering. Bad things are going to happen, but so are good things. And either way, you're going to get on the other side of it and you're going to be okay. My older sister, Heather, who just lost her husband, ran into one of her dear friends in town, and her friend was carrying her little grandson, and Heather asked her how often she gets to see him, and she said, well, actually, he lives with us full time now because his young mother died in a car accident last week. Her son's the mother of her grandchild. So you see, her friend, this one that she was talking to over the last few years, has lost a son, a newborn grandson, and now the mother of her other grandson. That's a lot of tragedy and a lot of loss. So Heather asked her how she was managing. How does she get by? And she said, you know what, Heather? Regardless of what happens, life has to move on and you have to keep going. Isn't that true, though? Life does go on. There are real monsters out there, but the monsters that you create in your head, they live there with your permission, which means you can also tame them. You can find ways to weaken them. You can actually even find ways to not have them at all if you're willing to put in the work. One of those big monsters that I've learned to tame is the thought that, what if my family stops talking to me? This is constant work, by the way. But that's one that could happen. That's a monster that could come to life. But me thinking about it ahead of time only makes it real now. It also makes it more likely that I create that monster to become real later. Why is that? Well, because when you're scared, you build walls. When you build walls, you isolate. So when I isolate myself from my family, well then, I've created my own worst monster, haven't I? I was worried they would stop talking to me, but instead I was creating an environment where I stopped talking to them instead. How dumb is that? But we'll justify it and defend it to make ourselves feel better when it never had to happen in the first place. So I created that monster, and when I realized it, I've started taming him. And now I start to notice when I'm allowing that monster to visit, and I put him back in his place. How does that look? Well, it looks like acknowledging that I'm going to have thoughts when my family does things without me. That's okay. That's human. That's normal. Not a big problem. It also looks like acknowledging that, I don't even want to be involved in some of their outings because I know every conversation will be around the religion. And I'm not going to add anything to that, and it makes everything awkward. So it's okay for me to not be there. No problem. Acknowledge where you're creating monsters in advance and make sure you're gentle with yourself when you do that. My challenge to you this week is to notice when you're letting your head run away with scary thoughts of things that might or might not happen. Worrying doesn't help your future, but it will steal your present. I love you guys. I'll talk to you in a few days.
Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends because we're just going to keep going bigger and better places together, and I love that about us. Talk to you in a few days.